You have to bear with me this morning because I have got allergies, and I mean they are tearing me apart. I took my allergy medicine, but it doesn't seem like it's not going to help. But anyway, if you have your workbooks, your Bibles, we're going to be looking this morning at Ruth, the first chapter in Ruth. And we're going to be looking at verses 6 through 18. The title of our lesson this morning is this: A Mother-Daughter Covenant or Promise. You know, last week, or the week before last, we studied a lesson concerning David and Jonathan. Remember that lesson? And the covenant that they made? Well, we're going to look at a situation here between the mother and her daughter-in-laws. And we're going to see a statement is made in Ruth 1:16 that each and every one of us has said this when we became a Christian. The very same thing that Ruth said to Naomi: I will go with you. That statement that is made here takes on the form of a commitment, doesn't it? It takes the form of love between two people. It also shows respect in this statement. And each one of us can say that same thing: I will go with you to somebody. Now, it also indicates to us in this statement there's a selfless act that's made in this statement also. In other words, a selfless act is doing something that's going to cost you something, right? Let's look at, in today's lesson, about a young man who made a selfless act. And look at this. This is this young man back in 2013. Cameron Lyle. He was a senior there at New Hampshire University. And he had practiced and studied and got in shape for 3 years just for this event that's coming up. He was getting ready to enter into the gold medal competition, which was the American East Conference Championship. He learned while he was getting ready for this championship, he had learned that a bone marrow had to be extracted for a 28-year-old leukemia patient. And they'd only given this young man that needed this bone marrow 6 months to live. Well, Cameron Lyle knew the night that he faced a choice. Cameron Lyle had to either make a personal choice between his own dreams that he had for 3 solid years had worked towards as an athlete. He could do one of two things. He could take and cut his athletic career short, and forget about his goals, or he could go and give the young man the marrow transplant that he needed in order to live. Well, I've looked at this and I thought to myself, comparing people today, how many people today would have took a commitment that Cameron Lyle took? And this is what he did. He decided not to go on with his commitment as an athlete, but he determined that he would go ahead and give the transplant to the young man so he could live. And that's what he done. So you see, selfless acts is things that we see every day in our society, don't we? We see people in our neighborhood. But today we're going to look in our lesson about two widows who were in a very tough spot, and one chose to leave her parents and everything she had behind in order to go with her elderly relative, her mother-in-law. The story is about two women. The story about Ruth takes place during the period of the judges. We don't know what judge, and we're not going to get into that. It was at this time. There's different speculations on that. But we do know that it was during the period of Boaz. And we know that the story situates itself in a spiritual, dark period of Israel's life, history. Because it's the time of period that Israel's population at this time were routinely abandoned all of Israel's teachings. They had gone out and whatever come into their mind, that's what they did. You look at that, we see that today in our society, don't we? People not caring about their spiritual welfare. If I want to go out here and murder somebody, I'll go ahead and murder them. If I want to steal from my neighbor, I'll steal. The same thing happened in Israel at this time. Whatever came in their mind, whatever their favor was, that's what they did. But we see here that although against this darkest backdrop, the story of Ruth provides us with a ray of sunshine. We see that Ruth, at the point of our today's lesson, Ruth has been and Naomi has been together in Moab for approximately 10 years. Well, Naomi's husband, Elimelech, and her two sons left their hometown in Bethlehem because of a great famine that was going on. They had to leave in order to take care of their families. But look where they go to. This is what I want you to see in this lesson, because I believe it has a bearing in when they do make a statement to go back home. While in Moab, the two sons married Moabite women. One's name was Ruth and the other Oprah. Well, what happened here is this. If you remember in the history of Israel, the Israelites had nothing to do with the Moabites. They were like enemies to them. That was because of their religion and the way they carried on. But however, the husband of Naomi, Oprah, and Ruth, they're deceased at this point in our story. They're already dead. So we see then that 3 people leave Bethlehem to go to Moab. 3 people. But we're going to see today in our lesson where only 2 people come back to Bethlehem. Well, what happens in our story is this. In Ruth 1:6, the writer tells us this. Then she arose, who is Naomi, with her daughter-in-laws, which is Ruth and Oprah, to return from the fields of the Moab. For she had heard that the fields of Moab, how the Lord had visited her people and had ended the famine. Or as the NIV says, give the people bread. Give them food. They left now because they had no food. Now they get word that God has shown mercy on Israel. And He has made a way for them to have food. So we see that they are planning to go back. But keep in mind, the Moabites and their descendants were from Lot. Remember that story? How he had relations with his oldest daughter, and the offspring or the descendants became the Moabites. So we see that they are abandoned from the whole assembly of the Lord because they did not come to Israel's aid during their wilderness wander. No, all the time they were wandering through the wilderness, the Moabites had nothing to do with the Israelites. They even, King Balak of Moab hired a guy by the name of Balaam. You remember that story? To curse the Israelites, to bring curse on them. So the Israelites and God just completely put the Moabites as their enemies. When Naomi had heard that there was going to be food again in Judah, she sets in motion a plan. She's going to make a plan now to return home. And notice this, she's going to go home with 2 daughter-in-laws. Keep in mind, these daughter-in-laws are what? Moabites. They were not even recognized. They were not even allowed to be in the assemblies or anything. But Naomi, anyway, makes plans to take these girls, her daughter-in-law, back with her to Bethlehem. Therefore, Naomi went forth out of the place of Moab, where she had been, and her 2 daughter-in-laws with her. And they went on the way to return to a land of Judah. This verse tells us that Naomi, Ruth, and Oprah had gathered all their belongings, their lifetime things. And now they are getting ready to go back on a journey, which is a dangerous journey, a long journey. And they're getting ready to go back to Bethlehem. because they know that the food is plenteous back in the land of Judah. And this is why Naomi is deciding now to go back. I think there's two reasons why this event happens in Naomi's life. Number one, she lost her husband. Number two, her daughter-in-laws have lost their husbands. She has no husband, she has no sons. They're in a land that they have to care for themselves. But when God showed mercy on Israel to give him food, Naomi thought in her mind, I believe, well, I don't know, hope, or find out what kind of support maybe I will have. But I believe she, in her mind, that she was thinking that she could get some help from her husband's extended family. So I think that she was going to go back to help her daughters and herself. She cannot be certain, though, Naomi can't. At this point in the story, Naomi has no idea what she will find when she returns. But she steps out on faith, doesn't she? She steps out on faith that her best choice in life is to go back to her own people. The three women then, as we said, they headed out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah, or to Bethlehem. Then we see that the writer in verse 8 says this, and Naomi said to her two daughter-in-laws. So Naomi, now in this verse here, we see Naomi getting a little bit hesitant, doesn't she? She looked like she's thinking, well, maybe my idea is not so good. And let's look at why. Naomi said to the two daughter-in-laws, go, return each of you to thy mother's house. Notice she didn't say to her father's house, to her mother's house. The Lord deal with you in mercy, as he hath dealt with us in death of our husbands. Now, Naomi, I see here in this verse, Naomi doing this. We may imagine that the women are about to leave Moab. Naomi has second thoughts about taking her daughter-in-laws with her. Naomi bids them to return to their mother's home. This may indicate that she feels guilty for asking them to abandon their own families and their own mothers in favor of her. If you walked up to a young woman today and you asked that person, I want you to go with me from California to New York. There are not too many young girls that would go with their mother-in-laws, are they? They wouldn't want to leave their natural mother. They want to stay at home with their families. Well, this is what I think Naomi felt here. I think Naomi, in her back of her mind, that she felt like she was doing an injustice to these two girls by even asking them to go back with her. Even though she loved them as her own daughters. She still wanted to show them respect enough that she could turn her back and let them make their choice and go back to their families. Secondly, she knew that it would be easier for these two young women to remarry if they stayed with their mothers in Moab. Because Naomi had no children. Naomi had no way of trying to find men, husbands for these two women if she went back to Bethlehem. But anyway, we see that her second thoughts is to better the girls rather than herself. Her first concern was, I'm going to take them with me. Then she starts thinking, is it better for these women to go with me, or is it better for them to stay with their own kind? So we see then in verse 9, the Lord grant you that ye may find rest, each of you, in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices, and they all wept together. The Hebrew word here, translated rest, sometimes describes a place or a state of peace, security, relief from anxiety. So when Naomi tells them, may God grant you rest, she's telling these girls, you will find security, you'll find relief, you'll find happiness by being with your own mothers. Then we see that Naomi shares in the worries and the travails that Oprah and Ruth is going to go through, that they are experiencing at that time. For a woman to find a new husband is the best path towards economic security in this culture content of these two women. Well, let's look at that. If that is the best security, where would be the best place they could find this security? It would be naturally among their own people. Naomi realized this. And Naomi had a change of heart. And she told her two daughters-in-law to stay in Moab. Go back to your mother's homes, where you can find this security. Then we see in verse 10, and the daughters, they say unto Naomi, surely we will return with thee unto thy people. This verse here gives me the thought of these two women, maybe in the back of their mind, they really think it would be better for them to be back home with their families. But I think they're showing respect here. They're showing love and respect for who? Naomi. They are willing to return with Naomi if Naomi insists, I believe. Then we find that Naomi and the younger women both first expressed their desires to go back with Naomi to her people. However, it may have been expected for the women initially to refuse. They could have refused Naomi right from the very beginning, regardless of their true wishes. They could have still refused Naomi and have stayed home anyway. But their love, their commitment to their mother-in-law was that they would go back with her. As a result, though, Naomi must now press her case. She must be stern even further. Excuse me. In order to afford her daughters at law an honorable exit. From the situation. If they were looking, thank you, sir. I told you this is, I don't have these attached, but very seldom. But anyway, they exit from the situation, and both young women, they cried or they wept at the idea of, it was said, "We will go with you to your people." Now they talk about a commitment and a love that these two young women had for Naomi. They were willing to give up everything they had in order to just to go with her mother-in-law. But Naomi knew within her own heart that I believe if she had taken them back with her, that she felt like, well, they're not going to be accepted. They'd be considered outcasts. And I think Naomi also knew that their best choices of security would be to stay in Moab. Then we see in verse 11, we see, and Naomi replied, "Go back, my daughters." This is not a command of anger or anything like this. This is a command of being concerned. This is a command or a statement that's being made by a mother-in-law that loves her daughters. She wants the best for them. So Naomi replies, "Go back, my daughters. Why must ye go with me? Do I have more sons? I'm old myself. Do I have more sons in my womb, that they may be your husbands?" Now keep in mind, Naomi is speaking from what? From the standpoint of an Israelite when she makes this statement. Because from the standpoint of an Israelite, these women would have had what we call kinsmen. So Naomi is telling these daughters, no, don't go back with me. I'm too old to have any more sons. And if I did have sons, you're going to be old women by the time that my sons are old enough to be your husbands. So Naomi's not doing this out of spite. She's doing it out of love by encouraging these two women to stay. Naomi had been away from her hometown now for 10 years by this time. 10 years away from her own people. Can you imagine a lot of times when we go off sometimes in a foreign city or a state to go to work somewhere? If we've been gone 10 years and come back, a lot of times people in our community don't even recognize us, do they? But Naomi knew that she had to go back. Naomi realized that the only chance she had in order for her to survive was to go back to Bethlehem and to hope that her husband's people would have mercy on her and extend aid to her. Naomi also cannot guarantee that she will be able to provide husbands for Oprah and Ruth. She doesn't know that she could do that. She has no idea that she can. Because with the conditions between the Israelites and the Moab, her people might not accept them. And Naomi certainly cannot provide future husbands for her daughter by her. She's too old herself. Naomi gave them a good reason to leave her and to return home. She said she was too old to produce sons that could be their husbands. You know, at this time and period in our history, the main concern of every family was that their daughters would find husbands and find security. They didn't have, women back then, they didn't have jobs or educations like we do today. Matter of fact, the customs of this time was that a woman was looked upon, down upon, if they got out in the public and was even talked with men. So their customs at that time was that they would have to find some way of being taken care of. If a young girl did not marry back then and have a husband to take care of her, normally she would wind up one of three ways. She'd wind up with being sold off as a slave and being used any way that the slave master wanted to use her. Or she would either go out on and be a prostitute on her own. Naomi realized that her daughters, as much as she loves them, that their best choice for them to find the security that they needed was to go back to their own parents and try to find husbands there. And they lifted up their voice and wept again. And Oprah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth pleaded to her. And I'm going to go on and finish this up. We see here that in this verse that the word to cleave onto is not something that we take for granted. It's something that in the Hebrew that meant that the case, a firm grip on somebody. Oprah's finally yield to the strength of Naomi's case. She finally gives in, Oprah does. But we find that she goes back in order to find this security among her own people. Ruth, however, decides to stay with Naomi and sticks closer to her. Now, they all wept together. Naomi and Ruth begins to take the trip. Oprah goes back to her people. They kiss each other and they say goodbye. But Ruth clung to Naomi. You know, as I was reading this, I thought to myself, I guess this is the man's perspective. What kind of a family did Ruth come from to be able to give up her own family and take Naomi over them. We don't know. The Bible doesn't tell us. But it was in God's plan, wasn't it? So we find in it, as she said, behold, thy sister-in-law has returned to her people and to her gods. Return now after thy sister-in-law. Again, she tells her again to return, but Ruth won't. Naomi tries to reason with Ruth and urges her to return to her people right along with Orpah, but Ruth won't do it. She won't budge. And Ruth said, do not entreat. Here's the verse in this whole lesson. The key verse, I believe, to the whole book of Ruth. And this is what Ruth says, do not entreat me to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For wherever thou goest, I will go, and wherever thou shalt lodge, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. We find here in this statement that even though she's a Moabite, that Ruth has begun to worship the same God that Naomi has, the Israelites. And she tells you, she says, no, I will stay with you all the way up to my death. Wherever you go, I will go. But Ruth replies, don't ask me to leave you. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. You know, from a Christian perspective, when you're ministering to someone, those will be the greatest words you'd ever want to hear. Somebody look at you that's not a Christian and say, your God is going to be my God also. And they take and they accept it. Where thou didst, I will die, and there will I be buried. Let the Lord do so unto me, and let him give unto me, that only death shall part thee from me. Now that's a commitment right there. There's another commitment that we see that's been made. Then we want to finish with verse 18. When she saw that she was courageous to go with her, then she left off speaking to her. Finally, Naomi realizes that nothing she can say or nothing she can do is going to prevent Ruth from going back with her. So they both set out on this long journey. Neither one of them knows what's ahead of them. None of them knows how they're going to be accepted when they get to Bethlehem. But Naomi puts her faith in the one and only God of Israel. And she takes Ruth with her back to Bethlehem. This story tells us and gives us this message. We see in this, we see despair, we see encouragement, we see commitment, we see joy, we see love. And that's the life that they enjoyed together. Thank you so much for your time.